especially in high mountains and in the poles, Arctic and Antarctic poles, ice is reducing in size, is melting faster. This process of global warming has many consequences. One of them, perhaps the best known one, is sea level rise. What happens? The ice that used to be in the glacier now flows down the river, down to the ocean. There's more water in the ocean. Additionally, water is becoming warmer, and warmer bodies occupy more volume. So there's more water, and the water occupies more volume. As a consequence, the sea level is going up. That, of course, is very dangerous if you're in a coastal area, and especially if you're in a small island. Small island states in the Pacific, in the Caribbean, are very much threatened by this, and they can see the effects of erosion, of changes in the life systems there, like coral reefs and so on. There's another set of changes that are perhaps more subtle, but also with intense consequences, and that's changes in winds and in currents. You know that the winds are very dependent on different temperatures in two areas. So if the ocean is warmer, wind may go in one direction or another. And let's imagine, for example, that this is the Amazonia, where I am, and that the prevailing winds tend to go in that direction. The humidity from here travels with the wind and then falls in the form of rain over there, most of the time. Now, if something changes in the planet, it is very possible that the prevailing winds may slightly change in direction and go in that direction. So the humidity that used to go over there is now going over there. As a result, if you're someone living in that place, you may wonder, wait a second, there used to be rain this time of year. Why isn't it raining as usual? Another drought? Whereas someone in that location who is receiving all this humidity, all this moisture, is saying, wait a second, another rain? It used to be dry this time of year. How come we're getting flooded all the time? So small changes in the planet can generate very big differences from the perspective of one local place. As a result, we are noticing more extreme events all over the planet. In Southern Africa, there's people talking about changes, not only in more droughts, more dry spells, but also changes in the beginning of the rainy season. Fishermen off the coast of Namibia are noticing that the fish are going further out the coast. In South America, in addition to the changes in water pattern, there's now more hail happening in some areas. In Jamaica, I just learned they've been having tornadoes like never before. Of course, the poles melting, more flooding in Bangladesh. The people at the community level are noticing that things are no longer the way they used to be. This generates problems with traditional knowledge of our climate. One very concrete example. There's a community in Mozambique called Xai-Xai that is on the Limpopo River basin, on the Limpopo floodplain. Floodplains are usually very fertile in their soil because the floods nurture that soil. Of course, it's good for agriculture, but occasionally you may get too much water. Now, the farmers in this community are really poor. They don't have electricity, they don't have the radio, but they have developed their own methods for anticipating the risk of flood. What happens is they just look at the ants, little insects that build homes underground. When there's a lot of rain and the water table, the groundwater begins to go up, the ants notice that their homes get flooded, and so they come out of the ant houses. And farmers who notice ants coming out have noticed that quite often that is followed by a flood, that the river brings more water. So they anticipate that they should be ready for departing or adjusting to a flood. Now, in the year 2000, something really unusual happened. There were a combination of cyclones and a lot of rain upstream, up the river. It rained like it had never rained before in recorded history. Everybody with information knew that this massive amount of water was coming down the river and eventually was going to very severely flood Xai-Xai. Some people went there and told the farmers, hey, you really have to get out. An incredible flood is coming. Now farmers who know their reality and don't know this person, they said, wait a second, look at the ants. They're not moving. Every time there's been a flood, it's been preceded by the ants leaving their homes. They're not moving, and you're telling me that I should go away? Why should I? Well, what happened was that the flood came so fast that it didn't give time to the water table to rise. So before the ants left, the flood came. More than 3 meters of water, 700 people were killed. This is just one example of how our knowledge built on the past may no longer be useful to explain the present and the future. If we think of the example of hurricanes, very threatening, tropical cyclones like hurricanes in the Caribbean or typhoons in the Pacific Ocean, they need warm water. They feed off warm water because it leads to more evaporation and it just makes more energy available. Hurricanes take heat and convert it into movement. Now, the temperature of the ocean has always been variable. There's seasons. In summer it tends to be warmer than in winter. There are cycles that take several decades, and scientists are understanding about that more and more. But we also know that with climate change, water temperature is going up. And with that, many anticipate that there's more chances of stronger hurricanes happening more often. We have seen over the past few years how much intense hurricane activity there has been, and the fear is, will there be more of that because of climate change? Well, it's certainly possible. Communities are certainly at risk. In synthesis, there's a lot that can be learned, but the short story is small differences can lead to big changes. And we know the climate is changing. We have plenty of evidence about that. The impacts within different sectors can be very severe. Water and sanitation, without a doubt. Health and diseases, mosquitoes that carry malaria or dengue fever are very sensitive to rainfall and temperature. If conditions change, mosquitoes may go to new areas where people are not in a good condition to defend from that because their system is not ready. Undoubtedly, agriculture and food security, crop failure all over the place, that's very noticeable. People experiencing the severe threat of famine. Fisheries are behaving differently and entire communities are at risk. Urban development is very much under threat because you design your infrastructure considering certain patterns of rainfall, and in the middle of a process of intense migration from rural to urban areas, which is accelerated by climate change, by the way, these people are going to places that simply cannot hold all this rain and or lack of water for drinking and so on. National economies can be very sensitive, especially in small countries that are very dependent on natural resources. And there's much more. Importantly, many times these different sectors relate to each other. These linkages can be very surprising, as this example illustrates. This text, which you probably can't read, is from a poster exhibit that has been going around on gender and climate change. The text is a compilation of anecdotes shared by women from Mozambique, from the Limpopo River Basin. So what I'm going to read is not the voice of just one woman, but of a community of women in this area. It says, droughts also kill through that terrible disease. When rains don't come, crops fail and food becomes scarce. Our sick children and husbands get weaker and simply die sooner. Caring for them and attending funerals leaves less time for work in the fields. Our next harvest will be worse. After dry seasons, the men who can make it try to get jobs in the mines. This is near South Africa, where there's a lot of gold and diamond mining. Get jobs in the mines